we're locked in. Welcome, brother.
Hello, Dylan Brown from Dylan Brown Podcast.
Welcome, Scott Eggenton. Round 2.
Hey.
Thanks for coming in, man.
Pleasure.
I will kick it off by saying anyone who's tuning in, this is a second part to a conversation with Scott and his story and Aikido. So you can listen to it before this or you can listen to it afterwards. It's going to give you more context anyway. But yeah. Man, so after the last episode, we finished the last episode with me saying that one of the reasons why I, number one, love training with you, number two, like having conversations with you about Aikido and martial arts in general, is because you're not just a dojo practitioner. You've gone out and you've had to practice what you preached, so to speak, and use this stuff in real life, which I personally believe just gives you more context and gives you, I don't know, more of an insight into the realities when it comes to martial arts. So in saying that, I want to get a little bit more of your story. Cool. And I want to know how it all began, man. Like you're so passionate about Aikido. It's been your number one thing forever. And what got you into it? What drew you to it?
It's hard to define or put down exactly what drew me into Aikido. It was super attractive to me after studying or doing Muay Thai and kickboxing in New Zealand. And then my teacher had said some really innocuous comment to me: if you wanted to learn to do a front kick properly, go to Aikido. Now, if you're looking at Aikido now, you'd be like, that's the weirdest thing to ever say. But that was way back in 93, 94.
Yeah, so how old were you when you were doing Muay Thai?
19.
Yeah, okay.
18, 19.
Yeah.
So at that point, there wasn't a great deal of Aikido around in small town New Zealand. So there was a Blitz magazine that had workshops of different martial arts doing scenarios. I believe it still does have that. So different martial arts doing certain things against similar attacks.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So I would be looking through this and looking at Muay Thai and going, yeah, that's just the best. Like that's so amazing. It's so devastating. You know, the crush mentality, you know, you throw one punch, I throw three back at you. You know, you hit me hard, I hit you harder. You hurt me, I break you. That kind of idea behind it. And then when he had mentioned this about a front kick, of course, I'd never heard of Aikido per se in the context of how he was speaking. So I looked at these martial arts magazines, Blitz magazine, and started looking at the Aikido that was presented in there. And I believe it was the late John Gay from Tomiki Aikido was doing the workshops on there. And sort of looking at that and, you know, out of a 6 series of photographs after the first 4, the Aikidoka was standing around while 2 people were on the ground recovering, you know. So there was this space at the end of the technique that it was all said and done, whereas everybody else had used like 6 photographs to get their point across. And I thought, well, that seems super efficient. That's pretty cool. Then at the time, sort of Steven Seagal was on the scene in his earlier movies. You know, the first 5 movies were his best movies for Aikido. So then all of a sudden, here's a guy on the big screen, an action hero that didn't look like your common action hero. You know, he wasn't muscly, he wasn't super fit. You know, didn't have a shirt off, doing high kicks and all these sorts of things. He's manipulating people and flipping them upside down, and that was like, cool. Here's a super relatable guy, because, you know, I wasn't at the time a very fit person or a very athletically gifted person, strong but not sort of muscular in that sense. Certainly not like Jean-Claude Van Damme or Dolph Lundgren.
Yeah.
Those sorts of guys. So here's this relatable action hero thinking, yeah, that looks like anybody could learn that. Anybody appears to be able to do that. So I was kind of on the cusp of leaving New Zealand anyway. So I wrote to the Australian organisation of Aikido and asked if they had a live-in apprentice program, an Uchideshi program, to which I got a letter back saying no, but the headquarters in Victoria had training every single day and I was welcome to come down and watch Aikido and participate after that. So in May 94, I moved from New Zealand to Australia, and I think in August I began Aikido after I got a job.
So you moved to Australia specifically to do Aikido for the most part?
Yeah, that was definitely a core part of the value of why I turned up here. And for whatever reason, it was Melbourne that had the calling out of everywhere. It was, I had some family here, so that was nice. But the Aikido itself was the place that I was finding affinity within myself to come to, having no real ability to look up Aikido. The internet wasn't around.
Yeah, like how do you find out information?
Just
magazines, books.
Yeah, the back of magazines. There was a glossary of dojos of the different dojo that were around that had clearly paid to be in Blitz magazine to advertise in the back. And the Australian Aikido was there. So at the time there was only 3 or 4 Aikido organizations in Melbourne at that time. 2 of them were the Iwamaru, one Shotokan, and Aikikai. And I went to Aikikai at the time. And so that was 94. And that's how I began physically training Aikido.
That's where it started. What a leap.
Yeah.
What a leap of faith.
Yeah. And I was also searching for ways in which to, I didn't like who I was. So I was looking to improve myself. And Aikido, I started picking up Aikido books that you could find in different bookstores.
Yeah, had you looked into other arts or things like that prior to reaching Aikido?
No.
We're going to go do yoga or
no.
sit in a cave or something like
yoga?
that?
I don't even know. My mum did yoga.
Yeah.
That's who did yoga,
yeah.
my mum. Yoga was not as cool as it is now. I think, one man in a yoga class would have been one too many back then.
And so you were interested in learning how to handle yourself as well?
Yeah. I thought I was pretty punchy anyways, having done a couple of years of Muay Thai.
That still puts you above most people.
Yeah. I wasn't too concerned being a relatively big, tall guy with some minor skills, but a lot of power and a lot of weight behind what I was doing. A little bit angry at the world, a little bit angry at myself. So that sort of all compounded into why I thought Muay Thai and kickboxing at the time was good for me. And then realized that wasn't enough, that wasn't intellectual enough. There's a whole series of fights and conflicts that happen on the mental aspect with people as well. On the spiritual planes that can happen. So I was just on a journey to find out what all of this was about, and Aikido tended to be the thing that I was most attracted to, and there were some other things that happened when I was younger that sort of were markers for me to end up into Aikido. Sort of the first time I'd ever heard the word Aikido, I was watching Doctor Who, John Pertwee as Doctor Who, Clash of the Green Meanies. And he walked into somewhere and there were 5 people with billy clubs and he trounced them all and he went, that, my friends, is a lesson in Aikido. And of course I yelled out across the house to my mum. It's like, Mum, what's Aikido? She goes, I don't know. Why? Where? How was it? And so I tell this story of what I just watched on Doctor Who. And she went, well, it's probably a martial art. That was it, right?
That's all you're getting.
That's all I got. But that was the first time I had heard the word Aikido. So I was quite young.
So you were just drawn to it.
Something definitely
beginning.
was hollering my name to come to here. And another sort of meta incident happened as well that, probably won't go into that, but
You can if you want.
I won't. And so that was like another key indicator. And then I arrived in Melbourne and began training at the headquarters in Victoria, Australia.
And then once you began training here, did you get what you were looking for?
In the beginning.
In the beginning.
Absolutely. In the beginning. Yeah, I thought that it was totally amazing.
Yep.
Yep. I thought any time I questioned what was going on, somehow I knew that whatever was going on was benefiting for a more profound usage. So if I didn't quite understand what it was that I was seeing or doing, there was something in there deep down that was going, it's okay, just keep on this and it will work out. In saying that, certain instructors weren't for me. The way in which it was taught, the way in which it was explained. So I narrowed down my instructors that I had down to 5 or 6 instructors out of the time. I think there was close to 8 or 10 instructors at the headquarters doing a lot of teaching down there. A lot of classes were going on. And that was just at that dojo, and I never expanded out into other dojo. It took me a couple of years to go to other suburbs to train in different dojo under the same umbrella.
And so, because I feel like that, and we touched on this a little bit in the last episode, which you mentioned a part of that Zen process is just holding on and seeing it through, having faith to some degree. Not necessarily just with Aikido, but I feel like with any endeavor, as soon as a couple seeds of doubt begin to seep in or you don't understand where you're going with the process, that's when people stop.
Yeah.
But you just held on for whatever reason.
I did. I got through probably close to 3 years, 2.5, 2 to 3 years. And then sort of it was, this isn't really what I was searching for. This isn't the Aikido I thought I wanted at the time. And I was by then I'd kind of whittled down into 3 or 4 teachers, one predominant teacher, and then the others were supplementary teachers. And I asked that teacher at the time, this isn't what I thought it was. Where's all this kind of martial Steven Seagal kind of movie Aikido that, the short, sharp, choppy stuff that what I thought should have been there wasn't being practiced or being taught or being talked about. And at the time, coincidentally, all the stars aligned, and she said, well, there's an instructor coming down to take a special weekend class. Come down and do that class before you decide to finish it. And I was like, I'm by this stage, I'm 22 and a half, I guess,
Fuck.
and I'm kind of, I know best, really grumpily. All right, who is this person? Well, it's David Brown Sensei. It's like, well, who's David Brown Sensei? Like at the time, David Brown wasn't teaching. He was just sort of as a recluse up in Christmas Hills, teaching privately in a very small group of people on a Sunday morning, pretty much, and stayed away from the national organisation at that time. So when was that? 96 or 7? So how old were you?
So to add a little bit of context to people who don't personally know me or Scott and our relationship, so I was born in 94, so I would have been 2, 3, 4 years old, whatever. And David Brown is my father. Shout out, Dad. And this is how we became connected. We're going to get into more of the story, but through Scott doing Aikido training with my father, which we will hear more about, and then through my father, meeting me, and that's how we've known each other for now.
Close to 30 years.
Close to 30 years, basically.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's how we're connected through all of this and a few cool, coincidental, serendipitous sort of paths. So,
yeah,
please continue.
So he turns up on the Saturday to train, and it was like rock star. There were so many people there. So many. There must have been 60 odd people on the mat, like back in that time. And I was really feeling dissatisfied about it all. So I didn't get on the mat. I didn't train. I sat in the corner on a bench with my arms folded in what I now know is the highest form of disrespect you can show in a dojo. Well, I didn't know that then. I was just disgruntled. And that's a disgruntled body posture. So, and I watched as the warm up began, and then the first move happened, and I went, well, okay, where is all this Aikido then? Like, here's a man that comes out and does it. That's the Aikido I'm looking for. And all of a sudden, he's on the stage. And I sat in rapture for the whole afternoon watching this Aikido and watching everybody struggle with what he was trying to present. And then my teacher at the time from the headquarters, once the training had done, Dave sort of did a few preliminary or see you later, goodbyes, lovely to see you all. Off he went, shot away, pure rock star. And everybody was left behind scratching their heads and talking about what had happened. And I was introduced to Malcolm McRae Sensei at the time. That's where that began, who was at the time David Brown's #1 student, who had also been a horologist with David. So David Brown is also a master horologist. So
Watchmaker.
So we got talking, and we had a really great affinity. Like, he talked a lot about Aikido, and I was absolutely, I was hooked straight away because he was freely talking about things that really nobody else was talking about or wanted to talk about. So the dojo emptied, and we were left in the dojo for another 2 to 3 hours after everybody had left, still talking about Aikido. And then he was teaching at another dojo and said I was welcome to come down and join him. So I did, and that was sort of when I held on to just 1 or 2 of the classes that were at the headquarters and began studying under Mel McRae Sensei at that time.
How long had he been training at that point in time? How long had he been training with
20
Dad?
years.
Ah.
Yeah.
So pretty experienced at that.
Very experienced.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a big guy, and, smash the shit out of people left, right and center, which was awesome. That's, I was looking for that.
That's what you needed.
And then no one really could do much to him. He wasn't sort of being the classic, when you watch Aikido, wasn't being the classic receiver or the uke, flopping and doing rolling. He was more absorbing all the techniques into himself. So, all the big throws, he would kind of just take a lean back and take all the pressure, and all the wrist locks, he would just sort of absorb all the wrist locks. And a very strong, powerful, centered man. So I spent probably a good 2 years training with him. So, mostly with him, and spending more time talking about it than training. So we'd do the class, and then I'd be back at his house after training at 8:30 and miss my train home at midnight. Thinking, how the hell am I getting home now?
So was he? Were you having like philosophical conversations with him? Was he, in terms of his training, if you can speak to it, was he deep on the metaphysical, philosophical, spiritual side of things, or was he purely a physical, technical person?
Most of it was the physical representations of it, but then the key, the Aikido, the key of his interpretations of the key and how it's utilized and where it comes from and all those sorts of things that happen. His insights into that realm of Aikido.
Yeah.
Which, at the time flew straight over my head.
What's a basic description of key?
Good. Thank you very much. You can't open a door unless you've got one if it's locked.
Yeah, fair. Fair point.
And it's an energy, it's a dark matter, it's the force that permeates all. It is the Force, young Jedi, who, you name it, it's probably that.
It's the underlying substrate.
Yeah.
I've always thought of it as energy in terms of a simple way. It's the energy that moves through stuff, or it is the energy that moves stuff.
Yeah. I think classically it's written as the energy that permeates all through the universe.
Okay.
So everything is connected, and it is connected via ki.
Ah, okay.
And ki, through this understanding, ki travels to you through your hara, from your back out the front through your hara.
Through your back.
Yeah.
Out the front.
Yeah. Yep. And you are, and therefore you are attuning yourself to the universal ki. You don't have anything to do with it. You've just got to get out of the way metaphysically of it so that it can be expressed through you.
So you can be an open conduit as opposed to a blocker or a resisting force.
Trying not to stop the ki. The ki permeates all. Do not stop it.
Got to let it flow.
Yeah. And when you stop the flow, you get sick. That's a version.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, depending on who you talk to, qi or qigong, that's a Chinese version of it, and there's a different explanation for that. Mana or prana is the same, but has a different explanation of what it is.
Shakti.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Dependent on which culture you're coming in to view what ki or chi is, will depend on how you are then exposed to the explanation of what ki is.
Every culture seems to come up with it in some way, don't they?
They
seem to, everywhere. Everyone talks about it. So it's got to be real to some degree.
Sure. So I spent all that time with Malcolm McRae Sensei. And then lo and behold, David Brown Sensei decided he would come back and teach, which was phenomenal. There was just this super excitement that was happening. So he came back to the headquarters of Victoria to teach, and then announced that it was going to be a black belt only class.
Were you a black belt at this point in time?
No. I was not. I was top end of third Q, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, black belt, second degree black belt. Black belt being Shodan and Aikido.
Yeah.
But he didn't say it was Shodan. He said it was black belt. Now that's important to the story as we go along. So nearing the ending of the white belt career that I had, I decided I would turn up and watch. And then all these people started getting on the mat that were in Aikido, the same rank as me or lesser rank than me, because they had a black belt in other martial arts. And it was a black belt only class, not an Aikido Shodan class. And above, you see. So here I was, not a black belt in any martial art, watching. And I then proceeded to turn up every time he taught and watched, while people struggled time and time again to do the class. So I had 2.5 years of watching.
You're watching for 2.5 years. Legit.
Every class.
Were you invited on the mat at any point?
Yeah, once
Yeah.
by David.
Yeah.
He said, came up to me and he went, "Why aren't you training?" I said, "Oh, Sensei, can I train?" He went, "Are you a black belt?" I went, "No." He goes, "Well, then you can't train." He turned around and walked off. Now, I didn't know who David was then. Like, you know, there was no training interactions that I'd had. He hadn't seen me. He had seen me when I'd done one of my gradings. He was on one of the grading panels for me.
Okay, yep.
So he had seen me. He knew that I was with Malcolm. Malcolm had talked to him about me. So that sort of all kind of began to flow a little bit more. And then Malcolm invited me out to Christmas Hills one Sunday where I was literally the only white belt out there. And that I only went out there 2 or 3 times. That was, I don't know if I wasn't welcome or that wasn't what was needed in that class. It was a very high level class being taught to people that had much more experience than I do at the time. So that didn't last long out there, but that gave me another meta insight into a dream that I'd had of this Aikido that I was looking for, and this very, very, very vivid image of a dojo that had appeared to me in my dream was, in fact, the Christmas Hills Dojo.
Really?
Yeah. So
you saw that dojo in a dream?
Absolutely. 100%.
That's crazy.
Absolutely, it's crazy. So at that point, it was like, well, another marker to say, this is where I am.
You're
to go.
on the right path.
Yeah. Am I on the right path? It was another marker to tell me where I needed to go.
Like, don't give up just yet.
Yeah. So then, I watched diligently and was training with Malcolm McRae Sensei through that time. And then during that, it was good because then Malcolm also had a sounding board in me to talk about what David was doing and what he was experiencing and developing his Aikido, contrasting to David Brown's Aikido, and I was a sounding board for that. So he got to voice out what he was doing, and I could put my 2 cents in as I saw them. So I got a good insight into the 2 versions coming from the same source. And then eventually, yay, I got to do my black belt. And I was absolutely chuffed that the very next training session available, I was there and I can't remember if I had a Hakama. I didn't have a black belt. So I, for whatever reason, I was probably a bit poor at the time. I had a Hakama for however reason, but I didn't have a black belt. Turned up, got on the mat. And what was the first announcement that David Brown said? Class is open to everybody. Anyone can train. So for 2 and a bit years, I sat on the sideline, not being a black belt, not being able to train. And the first training session available, it was now open to anyone. Now, I don't know if that was specifically designed to, just test me, but
would have felt like it.
Certainly did. Yeah. So that was a bit of a humbling experience. It really was that here I was. I'd put so much dedication into viewing and observing, and really being a fly on the wall, the third person entity looking at this Aikido and just not expending any energy doing the Aikido, but being able to observe Sensei and all the other students trying to learn it and seeing where they're messing up and being corrected. So I had this. It didn't look like it then, but it was a shortcut to me going, there's a whole bunch of things that you don't do because here's all these people getting corrected on not what to do. So don't do those. When you get on the mat, don't do those things. So
because you're at least you're getting a different perspective, right? Like you're seeing rapid learning happening all over the mat a lot.
Yeah.
As opposed to sometimes when you're training, you can get tunnel visioned a little bit and you're just focusing on yourself. You're not really watching other people go through it.
Yeah.
as much. So I can see how you can miss some things.
Yeah. So very humbling. We're back on the mat, and anybody can train. So then all of a sudden there was a bunch of white belts that were white belts being the Q grades within the organization, no colored belt ranking system. So here's a bunch more people in there, but I had my black belt, and I was quite chuffed with myself that I'd stuck it out for 6 years to get a black belt, a Shodan. And that's how that became. And then the teachings between Malcolm and David became not contradictory, but they were contrasting. It was very hard to continue to study both of them because they're both intense systems of Aikido. And I then chose to study my teacher, Malcolm McRae's teacher. So I moved from my teacher to my teacher's teacher.
Yeah.
So we were then both learning from David Brown Sensei at that time.
So you stopped necessarily going to his classes.
Once David was back, I literally stopped taking classes from other instructors. I turned up to train. That was it. I turned up to train, which, was a bit affronting to senior people.
So you decided that you weren't going to try and learn technically from anybody else.
No.
You were just going to follow the one person, one system.
Yeah. So then there were a few teachers at the time that were trying to follow what David Brown was doing at the time, so that they were the people I could go in and know freely that I could go in and train and not be too interrupted by their teachings upon me, but then their teachings would be somewhat aligned with what David Brown was trying to get across as well. But everybody else was just pushed to the side. There was no, especially teachers that when I would go in and do classes and be just training for myself, trying to reiterate and train the things that I had learnt within David Brown's classes, and then try and teach me things that were really in direct contradiction to David. And sometimes, more often than not, he had actually said, "That's wrong. You don't do that, and here's 1,000 reasons why you don't do that."
Yeah.
And then I'm going into these classes and they're going, "No, Scott, you don't do this. You do it like this." And I'm sitting there going, "What? Well, I think, Master Brown might have a different opinion on that." Most times I kept my mouth shut. But I'm pretty sure my body language and attitude would have shone through and rubbed people up the wrong way.
So you've spent all this time training leading up to arriving at this moment, training with him. With everything that you expected as you were leading into it, what you expected, you watched training for 2 years. I can imagine that you had an idea of what it was going to be like once you got on the mat. Once you got on the mat and you began training with David Brown, was it like what you expected? Like, can you remember what it was like once you could actually get hands-on and begin feeling this stuff?
No, I don't
Can't remember.
It's too far back.
Too far back?
Yeah, to remember what the instant was like, or what the feeling of grabbing a hold or being David Brown's uke was like, I really don't remember. There's just too much time and experiences past that's been written over for me.
Because you mentioned you were at the sort of a critical point in a lot of ways with your training. Once you were in this dojo training with them, were you still feeling like unsure about it, or like you need to test this stuff out, or you need to test them out to see whether it's legit?
Any testing I did back then, I was doing to prove to myself. I wasn't doing the testing to bring anybody unstuck at that stage. Now, maybe I need to apologize to every person I've ever trained with, because I'm pretty sure it came across that I was holding them up because I thought I was better than them. I never, that's not my attitude, never has been, pulling somebody up to correct them or make them feel lesser. It was always just to prove the point to myself, always. So every time I've resisted anybody and slowed a technique down, or it's been a trouble during that period of time, was only just to prove it to myself, just to make sure that I was continued to be convinced by what was going on. David Brown was always convincing. So I just had to make sure that whatever I was doing was convincing for myself as well. And that was, I think that's a really misunderstood part of what resistance training is in Aikido, because you don't see it in any clip. You always just see this high dynamic Aikido that, if you read the comments, everyone critiques. But the full resistance Aikido, where somebody grabs a hold of you in really bad positions and then you begin to move, and most of the times it's really hard to move and get a technique moving from that point, is just a case of making sure you're on the right momentum of where you're meant to be going to get things done. It's not the end all or be all, but it's just a proving ground, and it should be a proving ground to yourself, not me like if I grab a hold of you in a technique when in a learning environment and you can't do it. I mean, what's the point in that? I'm just being boastful then, and that's just terrible training. You feel shit. You don't get very good at doing anything. You reiterate you can't do things, so now you're just in this really terrible cycle. But sometimes you just sort of, myself, I've got to go, I know you're really good. I know you're walking the same path as I am. I just need to add in a bit more weight or a bit more resistance to convince myself that is true. And if you do it, then I go, see, it is true. That's great. That's good for me. It's good for you. But if I'm just holding you up just so I can teach you something.
Just to put someone else down for whatever reason.
Yeah, just so I have a space to talk to you and teach you. That's horrible, 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 horrible Aikido. I hate it.
Well, it's the straw man of Aikido, isn't it? In a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no...
It's a race to the bottom.
Yeah. Yep. And it still happens to this day.
Yeah.
So not a big fan of that. So I guess everybody that was ever offended when they've trained with me, that's your problem. It was never my intent. And I don't feel bad for it. So if you're still hung up on
it. Get over it.
Get over it.
It's all good.
Walk your own path.
It's a martial art in the end, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. Yep.
There's got to be an amount of tenacity or something to it.
Yeah.
Getting it right and getting it wrong.
Yeah. And that was one of the big things that as powerful but soft and gentle as Malcolm McRae is, you get slammed to the mat and he's so relaxed and so powerful, but you're still being slammed to the mat. There's no qualms about it. There's no ifs or buts. You got done convincingly. And he's happy to show that. I'm not of that nature. That's not how I get my point across. So again, it's just a personality. That's all it is. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, or mine's a bad thing or a good thing. That's just how it is. David Brown also has his own personality and therefore does his Aikido in a certain way, and you experience it in that way from his personality.
And from there, you, at some point in between when you started training with him, at some point you arrived out at Christmas Hills.
Yes.
And for a little bit of context, once again, for anybody listening, when we talk about Christmas Hills, it's my family home and my dad's house, David Brown's house, and there's a dojo out there. So since I was born, there has been Aikido classes and other martial arts classes and a whole bunch of weird stuff happening out there, from sweat lodges to art and everything. And so at some point between when you met him and you started, you ended up out there.
Living, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
Uchideshi.
As my dream finally came true. I became an Uchideshi David Brown sensei. And
Fuck yeah.
yeah, right. Which just sort of entailed that you were at every class that he offered. So that was all. That's the first and foremost primary thing. When he wanted to experiment, train, and teach, you were there all the time for that to occur. So his experimentation of Aikido, you were the body, the sounding board for it all. And then, keep the house in order, some finances in order, meals, that sort of thing. Do your best to offer your services to the master. And that was a decade. So that was 10 years. So fairly good insight into the evolution of David Brown Sensei's Aikido at that time. Sort of, I don't think anyone has a better insight into that decade of evolution there.
There's not many people who have, and once again, another justification or reason why listening to you talk about Aikido and talk about these things is so awesome. And it's a rare insight that we don't get much, because you may have met more people than me, but I personally don't know many people who have dedicated their life to Aikido in that sense.
Not in Australia. Australia doesn't tend to have that. Excuse me. Doesn't tend to have that system in place. America does. Some of the Asian countries does. Japan does. So there are a lot of uchideshi.
So it's happening around the world.
It is happening around the world. But just because it's happening doesn't make it awesome. It's about the quality of what is happening and the quality of the master in which you're studying from. So everybody has their own choice of who they're going to study with, and how much time they dedicate to it. So,
and then that's when what year would have you moved in there?
I was just trying to work that out. So I probably about 2007.
Yeah,
2007.
2007. Yeah, that makes sense, because I would have been year 7, so 13.
About that, yeah.
13 years old or so.
Yeah.
And so then that's what built our connection over the next 10 years, essentially, because I was living out there half the time.
Mm. Yeah. So 2007 to 2017. Yeah.
And so you've gone through all that time, and then this is where, for me, one of the parts that I really wanted to talk to you about is you were obviously training all the time, but then you began security and bouncing as well. And I'm assuming, I don't know if you can remember or if you can even answer this, but when did you have to use Aikido for the first time? Like, do you remember, or maybe a better way to ask this, maybe not necessarily outside, but do you remember any sort of pivotal moments where you used it and you were incredibly convinced about how effective was for you and the way that it worked for you?
Yeah, that didn't happen in security. Like I discovered that when I started learning jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and that was all through Aikido, meeting Ivan Rakitic, and so that was a fortuitous meeting that I met through David Brown, through his training with the Zendukai Karate organization. And then I met Ivan and asked about jiu-jitsu, and then asked if I could come down and learn jiu-jitsu from him, which he kindly said, yes, come on down, it's all good. So always respectful. So immediately he knew who I was and where I was coming from, and I knew who he was and where he was coming from, and then began to learn jiu-jitsu with Ivan. And then there were times in which I could sort of apply principles of Aikido in the jiu-jitsu things like, static holds. So no energy being given, but you're just holding the form of a shape, like a grab around the neck. No strangle, just, you're just locked in a position. You can't get your head out. A lot like a cattle hold, So then that was other sort of interesting insights, I'm sure, for the jiu-jitsu guys of going, there's no play in this. There's no pressures being pushed anywhere. And that was a big thing about how Malcolm taught Aikido was you don't give an energy, you don't pull, you don't push, you just hold the damn thing like you're a rock. So when I took that into jiu-jitsu, that was a whole new dynamic for them to feel. And that's when I was like, oh man, this Aikido business, it's not necessarily about all the techniques that you do. It's about what is behind these techniques that you can then implement everywhere else, which I'd been trying to do with the philosophy of Aikido into daily life.
Yeah.
So lo and behold, Ivan Rakitic was also a bouncer and a security manager. And there had been an altercation one night, and so he was drilling some things in the class in jiu-jitsu and asked me to hold down one of the students, grab them by the hips and held them down. It was no big deal to me. I was just holding them on the ground because it was just an immobilization, to which he was encouraging his student to get up, and he went, I can't. And then Ivan went, do you want a job in security? What's all that about? Like, yeah.
So you weren't looking for a job in security?
No. But it was a chance to, hang out with Ivan.
Yeah.
Cheers, Ivan. So, and that's how I began my first forte into security. And fortunately for me, him being an old school bouncer, but being a young old school bouncer, sort of had this really cool dynamic about him. It's like had all this wealth of knowledge from all the old school bouncers that he had worked with, like the hard men of bouncing, and but this young dynamic mind, and also the way in which he was looking at martial arts and security was really fresh. So we would sit and talk when in the down times of security, and through that I met some wonderful guys that did security. So shout out to Johnny, Dale, good on you guys. And through that was the beginning, and was really looked after, and was nurtured through. And so I had this really amazing apprenticeship in security. I wasn't left to my own devices. I wasn't now I'd sort of evolved a little bit. I was a refined meathead.
Yeah.
So, I certainly wasn't a exceptionally hot tempered person on the surface. So I could control that fairly well. So then my ability to be calm and discuss things and take more time than what would normally be practicable, I was able to take dealing in security. So in the beginning, not a great deal of altercations because of my nature was more calming, maybe more empathetic, more sympathetic to why people couldn't come in to clubs and such and so forth, or why they had to be ejected, along with all this wealth of knowledge from those three people I just mentioned, sharing their knowledge with me and their experiences, and me watching them deal with things as well.
So you weren't just by yourself there trying to work it the fuck out?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Which I'm sure a lot of people are in that position.
Well, probably now, because most of the really clever old heads of security aren't in it anymore. So that wealth of knowledge is now not being passed on at all. Whereas if you look around, you're not. I don't feel very secure when I see a lot of security.
Yeah.
It's a numbers game now.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter if the numbers are a piece of weakness.
Yeah.
You know, you need a lot of numbers. So yeah, I spent a lot of time in a core crew learning about security and bouncing. And
what has to change? And I know it's a broad topic, but it's something that has come up for me a lot throughout the time training with you, is the element how martial arts seems to change, or not change necessarily, but how martial arts, some aspects of it seem to become a lot more important or less important once you begin talking about it, applying it in a real life situation. Particularly in yours, it's a professional job. You're not out there preparing for a street fight. You're there to work, and you're there to control an environment and keep an environment safe, which is a lot different for the average martial artist. A lot of times you get into it because the odd chance that you're going to get in like a punch on in the street. So the considerations that you have to think about getting into a fight in the street is very different to the considerations that you have to think about doing a job like that, right?
Absolutely.
What are we can just open it up and talk about different parts, but what are the biggest things that change about martial arts when you put it into that kind of environment that someone who hasn't worked in that environment would not necessarily understand?
Probably for me, the biggest one was the reasons why you would do a technique in the dojo. You know, there's all the what if scenarios that happen that you can create fanciful events for you to have this reaction, and therefore that's why you do this technique. If somebody grabs your throat, you do these things. It's like, okay, you know, if you're, you know, I make fun of this one, but it's, you know, if you're crossing a river and you're on a log and somebody else comes across the log, then you've got to shimmy past them in an irimi. Any log I'm crossing across the river is going to be pretty wide. That's the first thing. It's not going to be a narrow log. So the fancifulness of the what if stories and scenarios that come about, you can tell that by the reasonings and those explanations that nobody's actually stood there with their knees shaking, thinking, I'm in for it.
Yeah.
You know, or they're in for it, or we're in for it. This is going to be a long night kind of working, if this is going to be my first 5 minutes of work and kicking off with someone. So that, yeah, sort of the what ifs, the reasons why, you know, they kind of just become fairy tale stories and are fairly uninteresting. Whereas, you know, if you've got an instructor that goes, hey man, when this happened to me, now I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, but this is what I experienced, and this is what worked, and this is what didn't work. Now that's kind of a really limiting way to study something, but it can cut away a lot of the superfluous stuff.
Like there's truth to that still.
There's still a truth to it. It's not the whole truth, but it gives you insight into a truth of things.
Yeah.
So you don't throw away everything. It just enables you to kind of focus into a point. And by discovering the depth of what did work in that scenario, you are more than likely to kind of find a whole series of branches that relate to other things to give you a more truthful insight into what's happening. But if you've never needed it and you're just explaining it as a teacher, which is fine if it's just the structure of a martial art, that's fine.
Yeah.
But I don't think, you know, you got to be pretty careful about being the person in front teaching and having this aura that you're actually really good when you don't know. Like it's all in your head. You've never tried it.
Because there's training, and there's in the dojo, and you can try and turn it up as much as possible, or you can put the gloves on and duke it out. But I don't know, you tell me. Is that any form of comparison compared to what it's like when you're actually dealing with a real life situation?
It's hard to pinpoint exactly. My attitude towards how I do Aikido and how I express Aikido is also my attitude and how I express it, how I expressed it when I had altercations working. So being a calmer person, being a quieter person, not being an aggressive person, not sort of taking the first step to do things, and enables sort of seeds of doubt to creep into your opponent's mind a little bit, the opponent being the person that's trying to do something to you. They're not really an opponent, it's just a convenient word.
Yeah.
So in that sense, that's how that worked for me. But a different personality might rush the situation and throw hands really quickly and deal with it. You know, a pre-20s, a late teenage Scott would have been a very different bouncer to the late 30s Scott that became a bouncer. Yeah, I think it would have been a heck of a different scenario and a heck of a different outcome of things, and probably a bunch of police charges, no doubt.
Just from letting loose too early.
Just letting loose, you know, going
not being careful
too far, going, you know, it's not proportionate. It's disproportionate to the occurrence.
Yeah.
You know, sorry, the guy wanted to stomp my face. So what's proportionate about things, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, the legal system is you know, if it's a big enough case, you're then put in front of 12 people of your peers, and it's like, well, who? No, because in this scenario, my peers would be martial artists, people that know the scenarios, and is that justified in their mind? But, you know, I don't know, not picking on any occupation, a banker that's never done martial arts in their life, how would they ever know what it's like to have 4 people chase you down and want to bash you up because you didn't let them, because you offended them in some form, culturally or socially? They don't know. Well, maybe a banker does know. Choose any occupation, you know.
So to stick on that point, we can kind of turn back into everything, but I think this part is something that I'm really interested in when it comes to the legal side of things and how that gets tied in with martial arts and defending yourself on the street or in an occupation. It's not something that's really talked about much, like in many dojos that I've been in, whether it's Aikido or another sport or art. It's rarely a conversation about the consequences of the legal side of things. It's more just the what if scenarios, I guess. Somebody tries to punch you, someone tries to do this, they try and grab you, they try and steal your wallet, steal your woman, whatever it is, and you do X, Y, Z to them to neutralize the situation, which is all well and good, obviously. But I've never really heard the conversation happen much about the consideration of the ramifications of if you really hurt someone in the wrong way, what can happen to you and your whole entire life.
Yeah, so, you know, let's assume this podcast goes out globally. Each country and each state within those countries are going to have their own legal system that you have to navigate. Here, it's a different legal system to say. In Victoria, there might be some different legal considerations as opposed to in New South Wales. It doesn't matter where you go or what contrast. We don't have a self-defense law where you can kill somebody in Australia. That's just, you know, it's just outright murdering and manslaughter. So
if you get in a fight with someone and you kill them by accident,
yep.
Is there a line with that? Like, I don't know how well you know this, but like, where is the line? Like, if it's very obviously someone is trying to kill you and you kill them, can you get in trouble?
You're not allowed to kill anyone.
You're not allowed to kill anyone. Gosh darn.
Sorry. You can.
But there's consequences.
There's always a consequence.
Yeah.
Now, you know, what is it? There is an old saying that I was told by an old karate master: you are better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6. Meaning you're in your coffin. So, you know, you you have to weigh up the consequences of all those things, and they have to be weighed up instantaneously. So you got to be thinking about those sorts of things constantly to know if, when that sort of thing happens, how far you step through those consequential lines to being, well, you're going to end up in jail.
Is that something that you have, maybe you or people in general, do people have the ability to be able to work that out on the spot, or is that something that should be thought about if you're going down that line, if you're learning martial arts, especially if you're going to be doing it for work, it's something that you should think about beforehand?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I feel like I wouldn't be able to compute that in 2 seconds when shit's going down. I don't think the ethical side, it might not be there.
Well, that's the brilliant thing of having mentors and a good crew that, you know, you can talk, especially, you know, if you have situations throughout the night, you have a debrief at the end of the night. You talk about things. You talk about what you could have done better, what you did wrong, what should have happened, how did we even end up here in the first place, why was the response like it was. All of those things happen, which is generally when you find an old school tight crew, man, they're tight. Like, you know, there is a strong connection and quasi brotherhood that happens there.
Yeah.
Because you are, you know, bringing men together. There's nothing like a good fight to bring a group of men together to really, really, really solidify where you stand with each other. Now, again, I'm not of that nature, so maybe metaphysically or in a quantum realm somehow, I was in less altercations, and ergo the crew that I was in tended to be in less altercations. And, you know, so all of these things can play into a factor. If you've got a bunch of hotheads, guaranteed you'll be punching on all night.
Well, did you want to be in altercations? And don't take offense for me asking that.
That's perfectly fine. The first night I worked with Dale, who was a former boxer, or is a boxer, was boxing, was about to go pro. I asked him, do you like getting in fights? And because it was the first night, he just looked at me with disdain in his face and he went, you're a fucking idiot if you like fighting.
Yeah.
Earn your money, go home safe. And I went,
it's a good lesson.
You know, I didn't know what was happening. I was throwing out questions to get answers, to build a story, to know what was happening.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, like, I can appreciate everything you just said that just then to me. Like, thank you. And I didn't say thank you. We continued the conversation, but thanks, Dale. That was a good piece of advice. And that was literally the first night I worked with him. That's what he said to me because I had asked the question.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't ask, you don't know.
Do you think that there's security and bouncers out there who get into it because they want to fight?
Probably. You know.
Where else can you go test what you know?
I don't think you last long. Not in Victoria.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty tight legal system. Like, it's all police checked and you know, VicPol issue licenses, security licenses. So, you know,
everywhere's got cameras. Like, you're not.
Yeah. There's lots to consider, you know, and even body language on your camera. You know, most places don't have audio unless you've got your own personal cam going on. But generally, everyone pulls out their phone and wants to record this stupid stuff.
So as you were learning and working with this crew, how did you build a framework of how you would make decisions in the heat of the moment? Like, how did you work out where your line was and when it's time to, like, take serious action or when it's time to chill and relax and buy more time and just navigate that whole environment? Because it seems like so many considerations to think about all at once.
one of the amazing lessons that Ivan taught me was I was working in a small bar and I kicked somebody, ejected somebody, didn't kick them out, I ejected somebody. I can't remember for what, something innocuous, probably standing on a chair or something, and then asked them repeatedly to not stand on a chair. Being a small bar, Ivan said, "Oh, you kicked him out." It's like, yeah. He's like, "Okay, are we making any money because he's outside? Like, is the bar making any money?" "No." "Well, everybody else is here." "Yeah, but he's not spending his money in here, right?" It's like, so think about that, because the bar's paying you. And if the bar's not making money, you're not being paid. You won't have a job to come back to. And that was sort of the spark that I went, right, let's try and work out how you can keep people in but change their attitude or their behavior inside of a place so that they can stay and they can keep spending their money. And that was sort of the beginning in which I was like, this is where the Aikido can really, like, the ideas of, blending and harmony can really begin to come into the fore of bouncing for me to keep them in, change their behavior and keep them in. Probably the next question would be, can you give me an example?
Sure.
Someone's just playing a goose and it's disruptive and, loud, obnoxious, all these sorts of things. Showing off to their friends is usually one of the major reasons someone's being a goose inside of a club that would generally get them kicked out, throwing ice or, hitting on girls that don't want to be hit on, whatever. And it's just it's a quiet conversation, as quiet as you can have it in a loud place without drawing attention and not making them feel like they're in trouble, because that's the worst thing you can do. Explaining that, you want to stay here with your friends, you guys want to stay here, that sort of thing. Yeah, look, man, like if this continues, you can't stay here and everybody's going to be upset. And generally, and then you hang around so you don't disappear. And generally they feel like they know they've been a naughty boy, and there'll usually be a little bit of a minor kickback, whatever, just a bit of raucousness, whatever. And then they calm down and everybody goes back to having a good time. They're still in the bar. The group hasn't left because the guy's been kicked out. Hundreds of dollars still passing over the bar. And it's all calm.
Win-win.
Win, win, win. And then all of a sudden you've got a communication form that happens that isn't necessarily on an equal footing, because you're not kind of equal, because you still have the power or the ability or the control to go, it's time to go, you got to go. But because you've been conscientious and you've been a human being to this person, everybody just wants to be treated like a human being, even when you're being a dick.
Yeah.
Like you've been with me when we've been out, and security have been absolute, for no reason, just absolute dicks to me. And I'm sitting there going, like, I'm ready to turn around and walk out of here. No one needs to be treated like this, let alone a patron that is, giving money through the business, which is employing you. Like, what sort of relationship is happening here? So that was sort of the first thing to begin with, is a mental game that happens. And when I continued to hold that as a form through security and bouncing, it always put me in good stead. Always. Never once did it go wrong for me when that was the case. And when I mean wrong, physical altercations.
Yeah.
So I solely put my hand up that any physical altercation that existed when I was doing security was all my fault. All of it.
It was all your fault.
Absolutely. It was my attitude.
Like, you could have done something more. You could have been something different.
If I was more patient, if I wasn't as cold as I was from standing outside on a winter's night all night, if I hadn't been abused all night and let it get under my skin, if I wasn't hungry, wasn't tired, just, all those things that are my problems. Therefore, when I could have utilized my best attributes, I was just at the end of my tether, my problem. And therefore, it kicked off. Things kicked off. So in that sense, it was always me, always. Now, the whole world has its own thing going on. Everybody's got their own reason to be offended for not getting into a club or being kicked out of a club or having to wait in line or name any reason.
How many reasons have you got? How many justifications from people have you received?
Number 3 main ones, Oh, you can't come in, but whatever. It's just how it is, You've got to be able to have a bit thicker skin. You got to, and it's if we're thinking about how society should evolve, you shouldn't have to have thick skin to do security. But if you haven't got thick skin to do security, then it all just goes pear-shaped too quickly.
In an ideal world, everyone's nice and everyone's respectful.
Now, in saying that, when I was on my game, like when I was well rested, when I was warm, when I was fed, when I was happy and I didn't have a problem in the world and I loved being at work, everybody loved that night. Everybody. There was never a drama anytime. There was no dramas inside. There was no dramas outside. The whole thing worked smooth, perfectly smooth. Crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Do you think without doing security, you would have received those sort of lessons through purely training in a dojo? That way to be around people to avoid the worst possible situation?
No, I think maybe if that's the attitude you took into the dojo to learn it, you have to take that attitude into it's not going to turn up for you in the dojo just by happenstance. I had mentors teaching me these things in this environment. If I didn't have those mentors, but that's what I wanted to learn, then I needed to do some self-study, bring it into the dojo, and then use the training as experiment to work that out, to come up with the answers. But the answers aren't based in any reality of truth. They're only based in the fiction of reality that you have in the dojo.
What are the fictions that you had in the dojo that when you were out actually working and trying to put your technique and what you know into practice, if you could possibly list some, what are the things that turned out to not be true that you thought were?
I honestly believe I could put people on their ass with a kotegaeshi, an outside wrist turn that is in Aikido. I honestly, before doing bouncing, I thought, yep, I can put this on and people will fall over, can fall over, through the testing and resisting that I'd done through the training, through all these sorts of things. And then in the scenarios that I actually used that technique, no one fell over.
They didn't fall over?
No.
What happened to them?
Their wrist broke.
So for context, you grab their wrist.
Yeah, you're turning their wrist outwards or this way.
So that's potentially a technique that people would see online and go, yeah, that's fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
That doesn't work.
Yeah. Now, there's a reason why you're doing an over-the-top flip. There's a reason you're doing that. So this doesn't break.
Yeah.
It does break. Or if you're a very drunk and flexible girl and you're looking to do that control, their wrist just folds and nothing happens.
Just bends around.
Just whack. You're like, oh man, like I've dropped hundreds of men in the dojo with this. Hundreds. and here I am looking at a 50 kilo drunk girl that needed controlling and didn't work. So in that sense, my kotegaeshi changed to add in more body movement so that it wasn't just a wrist control technique at that time that counteracted everything I was doing. But also, it does break your wrist.
So you're still walking away with a
Yeah.
fucked up wrist.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Terribly so. So, I think someone asked about Steven Seagal was walking through an airport and somebody asked, Stephen, do you honestly believe that people will be throwing like this? He said, well, if you don't go, you break your wrist. And sort of, I think the person doing the interview chuckled. It's like, well, he's right. This stuff is designed to break you. And the ukemi and the flips and the rolls in Aikido is designed so you don't break yourself having these things put on. So the better your ukemi, the harder I can put the technique on. The harder I put the technique on, the more devastating it becomes when someone doesn't receive it. So in that sense, that was one of the tests. The technique is well and truly over before you get through to the final departure of what is seen in Aikido, the big throws or whatever, and that is for training or demonstrations or explanations. It's well and truly over before you get to the end. In the beginning, it's finished. In the first instance of contact, that's when it is all said and done. And Aikido tends to have some very, very devastating techniques in which it does. Like things just stop in the first movements that you make in Aikido, not the whole circular throws and things like that. And I'm fortunate that in a scenario I clipped somebody and they went to sleep in the first moment, and I was really upset I didn't get to do the big throw. It's like, oh man, I was really aiming to do the big throw in Aikido here, and I'm looking back, I think, I'm so glad I didn't get to the end because I would have broken their neck on the concrete.
Yeah.
So I'm glad they went to sleep in the first clip that I went past them, knocked them out in that first moment. So, but that was also because I had the training that said you have to do these positions and end up here first to make this work, and then I think part of the Aikido argument is, well, that as you're going through these big circular motions, you take care of your partner, and it's like, it's really like, that's the highest ideal of Aikido, is to take care of your partner. That's the ultimate in Aikido, is to take care of your partner. Now, if the guy's threatened you with an iron bar to crush you over the head and he's got a couple of mates, you're not really thinking about preserving them. You're thinking about preserving yourself.
Yeah.
They are the last thing you're considering in all of this. So when people say, well, you've got time, you're meant to look after their partner. Yeah. And that's all established at the beginning of when you decide you're going to use the technique, that you'll try and do your best to not damage them. But if they get damaged, so be it. But if you've never actually had that threat put upon you, I don't think you're in any position to offer that as advice. Or if you do, give it context. This is the philosophy of Aikido. This is what we're working towards. This is it. Not just, I'm saying this because I'm the teacher and I have the knowledge. You don't have the experience.
Yeah, like how many Aikidoka out there do you think have, like, for instance, use it in their work and actually have the experience to see if their technique works the way that they think it works?
I think a lot of martial artists do have an opportunity at some point during their life to use it. But are they then put in the scenario where you have to do it every shift for the entirety of your shift? That potential of that threat can exist at any point. If I piss off a stranger today out in the street, or a stranger pisses me off for whatever reason, literally you disappear into the ether. There's so much that's going to happen that we're not going to cross paths again. But if you walk up to the club and I piss you off, well, you know where I am for that entire night. You know I'm going to be there the next night. And you know I'm going to be there the next week, and the week after that, and the week after that. Now, that's a lot of stress to put on yourself, knowing that there's an opportunity for the person to turn up and surprise you again and again and again and again, solely or with their friends.
Which can be stressful, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's part of the edge training, and you've got to know how to be on edge for a long period of time and take a rest when you need to take a rest and recoup and level yourself out again and get back in it and be aware. So sustained awareness is a big thing.
Because awareness is massive, right? Like being aware in an environment where something could be going down at any point in time, for like 8 or 10 hours sounds really difficult.
Yeah.
And like we were talking about in the last episode, being aware in training for even a couple minutes is maybe not a couple minutes, 10 seconds. Being hyper aware, like your life depends on it in training is really hard, as you were saying.
Yeah.
And doesn't happen often.
Yeah.
So it's a really difficult thing for probably most people to understand what that is actually like, where you're just hyper vigilant, not vigilant, maybe that's the wrong word, but hyper aware.
There's vigilance.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because you have to be prepared to move.
Yes.
Move your body quickly.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, even in a training environment, you just don't have that kind of stress level.
Yep.
Really.
Yeah. So that's the key to a good crew, is that you can take, you can alter the awareness. So if I trust you that you're really good at sustained awareness, and you trust me that I'm really good at sustained awareness, I can relax off. I don't have to be hyper vigilant. You can take the role of being the man on the lookout, and then once I feel regrouped, I can step back in, and you can step out of your vigilance because you trust me to be vigilant as well. So you can interplay that way as well. So, using 4 sets of eyes on a door instead of just one person. And, I've worked in places where not with that crew, with different people, where I've been standing on doors with, 3 other bouncers, and I'm the only person looking around. Everybody else is chatting up girls. Now, they're probably the smart ones, right? They were probably the smart ones, but I was the one that was always safe.
Yeah.
So I'll take the safety over it.
When it comes to what you think people get in a regular martial arts training environment, let's say that I'm doing MMA and I'm training for a fight, and that's what I'm thinking about on the daily basis. I'm training for a one-on-one fight. In that set of rules, when it comes to the context of that broader scope of just being out in the world or being in an environment like that, I know it's not just in the workplace, but the average person, if you're in a dangerous environment, things can happen. What do you think is missing, or the most fundamental things are missing from that type of training if I was just training for a fight, a one-on-one fight with rules? What's missing when I bring that out into the broader scope of the possibility of situations?
Well, that's a really good question. It's a deep, hard question to answer. I think maybe what you could think about, if that's sort of how you're kind of planning things, is the surface is uneven. It could be slippery as well. Objects are around you all the time. The consequences that could happen, whether it's legal consequences or returning with mates, weapons, sort of all the things that could happen in a real life or street scenario that are taken out of a competition or a ring fight to make combat sports safe. I mean, it'd be really weird. Dana White, if you're watching this, this is a fantastic idea, by the way. Put some curbs in the ring, throw some broken glass around, put some
WWE style, chuck some chairs in.
Dirty syringes, some tacks, and, floor's a bit slippery, and you've got to have 5 shots of Fireball before you get in and have a fight. I don't know. Take your mouth guard out. and your mates can jump the fence and join in.
Yeah.
Putin.
We need Putin. He'll do it.
Yeah, he'll do it, right? So it's the MMA scenario is touted as the closest thing to a street fight, and yet, it probably is. It probably is, but it's also so far removed from a street fight. And generally, martial artists don't fight each other in the street for some reason, because you're trained to fight, so you don't fight out in the street. You become a better person, so you don't do that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would never work in the street. Well, the average person that gets into a street fight is fairly undisciplined, meaning they'll generally get into a fight. Whereas if you've done any form of martial arts or something traditional that has a high ethical and moral basis, you're well disciplined to not escalate the problem until it's needed to be finished. Like, you don't escalate the problem to get into the fight. It only escalates so you can finish the fight. That's a big thing, right? Because it's all fine and dandy dancing around, mouthing off. And the amount of, I've had plenty of situations where people have gone, come on, swearing at you and, putting hands up, come on. And you stand still. You realize on camera you look like an idiot, right?
Have you watched yourself back on CCTV?
Yeah, and you're standing there and you're fully aware of what you're capable of, and because nothing's engaging you, it's all just yippee yapper, and it's all just this feathers of a peacock being shown to you. Like, you don't have to engage to that. You only have to engage when it is physically threatening to you. Emotional and social threats aren't such a big deal for you. And there are scenarios in which, there's certain types of people that are affiliated with other certain types of people of their same ilk, where you have to deal with things a little differently.
Yeah.
But, you should hopefully go your entire life never having to deal with those types of people.
Yeah.
Security in nightclubs or bouncing in bars and clubs brings you into contact with that element of society.
Yeah.
And therefore you better have some really good basis of your training, some good solid foundations, and sometimes you just have to know who you're dealing with as well. And in Victoria, that's a problem, because that's association with nefarious characters in Victoria. But in security, in club bouncing, there are times where you need to know the people that are of nefarious character to keep things calm.
Yeah.
There's a balancing act. There's a play that's going on. There's give and take. Now, that's the limit of the depth in which I'll go to that. But it's a really difficult thing to keep in balance without becoming illegal.
Yeah.
But in Victoria, there's a law that says you can't associate with people of this character, and you can be, whatever it is, charged or fined or whatever. And especially as a security guard, you can have your license stripped
if you get too tied up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's tough calls to be made. So your job's on the line. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, and you've got to walk a fine line in which you can balance that.
It's the decision-making process of all these things interests me so much. And I know that we talk about it a lot in training or off camera, and it's questions that I ask a lot as well, because, I'm not out getting in fights every single day. I'm never in a situation. I'm basically never in an unsafe situation. Haven't been in ages. And so the trying to think about the right decision-making process when I don't have to deal with it every day is kind of difficult, you know, and knowing where I've heard other people who do martial arts have spoken to me about this a lot, which is that just knowing when to chill, knowing when to go, knowing when to pull the trigger, and trying to work that out, really, because there's one thing in an ideal world where you feel fully justified of your actions, you know, like if you think about and this is the same for verbal arguments as well, like with someone, whether it's one of your friends or one of your family members, when someone really does do you wrong 100% and you feel 100% justified, it's quite easy to tell them to fuck off, and it's quite easy to retaliate in some way. It's not like it doesn't feel like an ethical decision, but I've almost never been in a situation where that person's 100% wrong and I'm 100% right. And so as soon as that isn't like that, and the waters get a little bit muddy, it starts to become a really difficult question of like, when do I take action and when do I not take action, and how severe of action should I take? And often that thought process, by the time you've thought about that, it's too late. and I've definitely been in a situation where it's the moment's passed me by and I've looked back and gone, fuck, well, I wish I coulda, shoulda gone through that thought process, you know? And how do you think that people can go about coming to like their own decisions about, or even people in martial arts, like how do you decide when you're going to take action? Like, is there some sort of ethical or philosophical points within Aikido that speak to knowing when and how you should act?
Well, that's a tough question, man.
I don't know the answer. It's a hard one for me. That's why I ask.
I think if you can put like a solid group of people that do like-minded training with you, then you can set a scenario up within the dojo. And, you know, if you've got good communication with your teammates and your dojo folk, then you can kind of explain, you know, man, I've been thinking if someone was to rush me with 3 mates of theirs and feel intimidated, is there a way in which we can set that up in the dojo? Now, it's easy to get one person to rush you and have 3 people standing behind them. You would have to then go about and convince yourself and act what it is you want to overcome. Because in the dojo, generally you'd feel pretty safe. Or maybe the other version is go find the 3 guys that can beat the shit out of you in the dojo and go, man, I need you to chase me down. I need to feel this, and I need to know what it's like and what is inside me to find out. You have to find out about yourself in some fashion.
Like, it's got to be experienced in some way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aikido is, I think if you're trying to discover that in Aikido, then that would be the way in which to do it, because it tends not to turn up. We get really comfortable in Aikido training. We don't really have a sense of high pressure environment because you get pretty relaxed and you're meant to be. So that, you know, the more relaxed you can be in training, then you're training yourself to be relaxed when you may need it.
Yeah.
So that's the benefit. You know, you're not hyped up, you know, ready to
not
go.
All tensed up and shit.
Yeah. Again, like if you're a super edgy guy and you're just ready to go for a fight, and I'm sitting there like Buddha being totally zen, who are you fighting? Like, I'm no threat. And if you did fight me and you won, what sort of victory is that? It's pretty hollow. But if you're really edgy and you got your hands up and I'm really edgy and we have a fight and you win, yeah, man, like I just took down a guy that's 40 kilo heavier than me with 10, 20 years more experience. I'm a winner. I'm a champ.
Easy to justify it.
Right.
To myself.
Sure. And probably to everybody else.
Yeah.
You know, it's a good trophy.
It's like, fucking me was jacked up anyway. He deserved it.
Yeah. But if the dude's like, you know, Oh, yeah. Look, man, I get it. It's all good, but I can't help you. I just can't help you, for whatever insert reason that is kind and generous and humane.
Yeah.
Or truthful, whatever it is, then that would be the outcome. So it's a tough question. I don't tend to have that, but certainly when you're in occupations that require you to do that, and you do have debriefs and you have downtimes and you have mentors that can talk you through things, the learning, like, you can't be slack, man. Like, you got to know it for the next time, and the next time might be 5 minutes time. So you got to learn your lesson instantly. It's got to happen so quickly. The dojo, you have all the time in the world. You've got your lifetime to learn a lesson.
Yeah.
if you want to learn the lesson.
Yeah.
Right? You may not want to learn that lesson, so you don't have to put any effort into it.
You're right, because you could spend a lifetime in the dojo trying to learn something that you could find out in 4 seconds in a job like that.
Yeah. or for Aikidoka is get in the ring, put some gloves on, put some padding on, and find out a little something about yourself. Like, there's no harm in that as an experience.
Do you maybe not encourage, but do you think that, and this is taking away, I guess, Aikido technique, so to speak, do you think it would be helpful for Aikidoka to just get in the ring and just slog it out?
If that's what you're chasing.
Just to see what's up?
If that's what you're chasing.
You did it to me.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely learnt a lot from it.
Yeah.
I learned I don't want to fucking fight someone like you. First lesson.
That's a good lesson. If that's what you're in Aikido to learn, if that's part of what your body of work you're studying requires you to study, then yeah, get in the ring, man. Like, call us up. Let's have a look. Let's try it out.
Just to see.
Yeah. If you've never done it before, I wouldn't go around dojo bashing and challenging people. Like, you'll get your ass kicked.
Yeah.
So you do have to have a proficiency. So, just do good solid training, do good technical training. I heard
well, you told me this a while back and I can't quite remember. So if you can remind me, what were and was this directly from Ueshiba, the founder, what were the rules for engagement, or I can't think of the right terminology, but the time to step in, there was like 3 rules or 3 situations where it's where it's okay to get going.
I think there were only 2. It was when your life is threatened, when someone else's life is threatened, or when there is more than 3 people against one.
More than 3 people against one.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It is. So that's, as I interpreted that, it would be 3 people against you. That's when I would step in.
So if you saw me getting picked on by 3 people and it's not looking good.
People.
Yeah.
Before against.
Don't want to get on the losing side.
No, exactly right. That's when you step in, and I don't know, that's when you would decide how you would begin to de-escalate a situation. That may mean you go hands-on. It may mean talking. That's up to you on how you apply your Aikido in life. But when life is on the line, and when it is 3 or more, not 2.
Not 2. Do you know why there's...
You should be able to deal with 2.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know why it's 2.
Should be able to deal with 2.
I don't know why it's 3 and why it's 2. Clearly, Sensei was good enough to. Maybe it stops you from just getting into confrontations that are mostly superfluous.
I guess a lot of confrontations are going to be 2-on-1 to some degree, which you could get involved in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe the beating from 3 people is worse somehow. Like it can exponentially become much more worse.
It's not 30% more or
Yeah, it's 300% more,
Yeah.
dangerous. I don't know. That would be a really good question if you could find a psychic that can talk to dead people. Get them to ask her sensei why.
because I feel like I want to know if there's more rules like that exist in terms that set up more layers for a framework of decision making when it comes to.
I don't think so in Aikido.
Don't think so. Yeah,
No, it's you're just applying the ideology and the philosophy, and you begin to embody it. Then certain things don't arise in the world for you.
yeah,
So once you're embodying a certain attitude, certain things don't happen to you. If you search the shadows when you're walking down the street, there's a good chance you won't be surprised by somebody lurking in the shadows. There'll still be someone lurking in the shadows. You just won't be surprised by it. So then the element of surprise is taken away because you've applied a principle. Right. Now all you're dealing with is who is in the shadow. And you're not surprised by it all.
Another area that you've spoken about a lot, and this came up a lot back when you were running the self-defense, the women's self-defense classes in Fairfield. I don't know what year that was. Pre-COVID. Pre-COVID at some point. And it brought up a lot of conversation about everything that happens before the critical moment where something actually gets physical, which, I don't know, it seems more obvious now, but prior to these conversations, it's not something I ever thought about. I never thought about the awareness aspect or the preparation aspect and essentially everything up to the whole way that you walk through the world before that moment where something gets physical. And I don't know, for men, for whatever reason, that conversation doesn't come up as much. But as soon as we began talking about women's self-defense and having just been in a training environment as much as you have and as much as I have, it becomes really apparent really quickly when it comes to surprise and size disparity and all that you don't want it to get physical, which is something that you showed me, and I just can't believe I hadn't thought about it. And it brought up that whole question of preparation, which I don't think a lot of people in martial arts would think about in terms of the way that you just walk through the world.
But you do. You just don't apply it in the world.
How so?
You go to the gym, you do cardio, you do weights, you do jiu-jitsu, you do boxing, you do wrestling, and you do kickboxing. Also, you can do MMA. There's all your prep to do MMA. You got to put your gi together. You got to get in your car. You got to get to the dojo. Potentially, you have to lay the mats down, and then you do your warm-up before you do Aikido.
Yeah.
There's always preparations.
So we're always preparing for life in different things.
You want to drive your car? Yeah. What do you need?
I need to learn how to drive a car.
Okay. What else do you need?
Need a license.
What else do you need?
I need a car.
What else do you need when you've got the car?
Need some keys.
Hey, you still need keys.
Still need keys.
Look at all that preparation, and you haven't even got in the car to start it.
Yeah.
So there's always preparations, but it's never thought about. And the big problem I ran into when it came to running self-defense courses, and specifically for women, females, anyone that felt more vulnerable, really, is that the biggest thing that was ever told to me by participants and people that inquired was, I shouldn't have to think about these things. I should be able to walk out there and feel safe. Yeah, but there's nothing in your life that you don't do preparation for.
Yeah.
You want to go to bed? There's a whole preparation that you have to do before you go to bed. And yet now you want to walk through what can be a potentially evil and devastating world with no preparation, let alone no training. Like, this is absolutely insane. It's insane. And well, that's 99.9 reoccurring of the entirety of the population.
Yeah.
you know, or you want to go traveling. What do? You check to see if, what is it, DFAT? You know,
you
see if there's any problems in that country.
You check the travel sites.
Yeah.
Smart Traveller.
Get inoculations for malaria.
Yeah.
All these things you prepare because you're going overseas. But, you know, I want to go out. I want to get drunk. I want to become a potential target or vulnerable, lose all sense of my surroundings. And I want to wander home in the middle of the night while there are bad people and things out there that do prey on the vulnerable.
Yeah.
And the imperceptive, and you just expect this society to fall for you and say, you're right, this society should be better. And I agree, this society should be better, but don't be blind about it.
And I feel like when we were having these conversations, or there was a time where I wasn't thinking about this at all, and then at some point there was a time where it was on my radar, and I was having this thought of like, well, yeah, what should it be like? Should we be aiming for a world where it is safe for everyone and you don't have to be as prepared? Like, you should be able to walk around and be safe. That'd be fucking nice. And I know that we both agree with that. And vice versa, we should also, or is it everyone should be prepared and then it doesn't matter, you know? And for whatever reason, that was a binary decision in my mind back in the day, as opposed to, oh, well, we can aim for both of those things at the same time. We can, on one hand, try and prepare as much as possible, and then also at the same time endeavor to create a society where everyone can just walk around and feel safe. You don't have to lock your house and lock your car. In an ideal world, like, we may as well aim for those things for sure. But that whole preparation aspect, hadn't thought about. All my time training up until that point in time started from the physical, started from the fight. Like, what happens when someone grabs you? What happens when someone punches you? Or basically, what happens when someone's this far away? That's where the training kicks in, as opposed to everything that can happen beforehand. What do you think are the biggest considerations for preparation, or how it should be for preparation for a person or a martial artist living in a world that's potentially dangerous?
Say again in a different way, please.
Coming from the place, let's say, where I'm not prepared at all, and I am basically just working on my technical skills, so if someone wants to fight me, I can fight them back. That being on the least prepared end, what are the best considerations for people to keep themselves safe before it gets to that point? Like, what are the things worth considering when it comes to distance? I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah,
I could list a few things, but
well, you'll probably be right. The distance, things that are in the vicinity of you, the time or the timing of such things, the perception of yourself. Are you aware enough to be cognizant of the things that are around you, or the environment you are in, or the environment you're going to be in, and the state in which you will be in when you are in those environments? It's just forethought, really. Like, it's a fair, the course that I created was a very succinct course in that sense. But to me, it was all just common knowledge, but apparently it's not common. So you've got to kind of believe some truths from people that have experienced these things before. One of my biggest reasonings was, what would you do if you were caught in a dark alleyway? Okay. Why is Scott walking down a dark alleyway? That's the quickest way home. Is it the safest way home? Is time more important than the unknown? And if time is more important than the unknown, then why aren't you in a cab or an Uber or in a car or all these other things that make you avoid the dark alley scenario? Why are you in that scenario? What can you do to remove yourself from that scenario? So you have to have a little bit of thought. The dark alley scenario is a terrible scenario, false scenario. I've never walked down a dark alley. You've got a phone, put your torch on. It's no longer dark. I mean, come on. All these sorts of things that happen. One of the biggest things that occurred to me where I realized that these things are really hard to implement instantaneously, although they seem really concise and profound and truthful. The biggest one, which I learnt from working with a tight crew, was at the end of the evening, we walked each other to our cars. So we would kind of mostly agree we were going to park our cars vaguely in the same spots. And as a crew, we all walked to the car. Now here's 3, 4, 5 guys, all had martial arts training or some form of fighting, bouncing experience or boxing, who were well capable, all supporting each other and backing ourselves getting to the car. And we experienced that. Part of the course was to say, you know, if you're offered to be walked to your car by someone you trust, take it. Because what's the worst thing that can happen? You get to hang out with your mate for another 5 more minutes. Now, in that course, when you were helping me instruct that course, we offered every single one of those participants to walk to their cars, and only one person took that up begrudgingly, because it's a sense of, I need to feel like I'm independent. I need to feel like I'm strong. There's a weakness that, you know, I don't want to be chaperoned or taken care of by, you know, men especially. But, you know, I need to feel like I can walk through this world perfectly fine by myself.
You want to feel independent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But here is the environment in which 5 well-trained burly men did that.
So even you can recognize that it's still the safer option.
It's the better option.
Yeah.
And what's the worst that can happen? You get to hang out with your mates for 5 more minutes. The worst thing that can happen is something does happen, but you've got everyone around you.
Yeah.
Or the thing that may happen sees that there's 5 of you or 3 of you or however many of you, there's more than one, and just realizes that's too difficult. The next victim will be easier. So you cease being the victim just by association.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
So, you know, and that's so simple to implement, but it's so difficult for people that feel vulnerable, that want to feel like they can be strong and independent. But it's not a weakness, it's a smartness.
Yeah.
And because you're smarter, you're stronger, and through all of that, you can become more independent in other areas where you don't necessarily are the vulnerable target.
Yeah. Well, it's an acknowledgement, isn't it? Like just acknowledging what you have and what you are capable of.
Yeah.
Like I can acknowledge that there's a certain amount of people that I just couldn't beat in a fight. Like you get jumped by a certain amount of people. That amount of people might be different for everybody, but there's a certain point where you're fucked, right? You'd be much better off if you had somebody else with you, or you had a few people with you, or you were more prepared. So yeah, that's a really good point. And I guess it ties in. You made me think about it, which is ego or pride. You know, because lots of the men, women, everyone, I feel like this is applied to, especially when it comes to arguments, physical or otherwise. A lot of the time it comes down to pride, right? Like what you were saying. Even for guys, it's like, I've thought about this a lot when thinking about, you know, if I got in a fight with someone who's my size and my skill level one-on-one, if that person wanted to keep me in the fight, it'd be pretty hard, right? Like there's so many ways that I would be able to get out of that and walk away. Like it'd be almost impossible to keep me in that situation. The only way that I'd be kept in that situation if it was multiple people or like you're backed into a really bad situation. I don't know, you got a weapon on you or something like that. But otherwise, it's like that one altercation that you're training for all your life, you could easily get out of. You know? And I started having that thought of like, well, that one fake scenario that I've got in my mind that I'm going to be able to beat the shit out of someone, I could probably walk away from that one every single time. You know, so it's like, but that's an ego thing, which is that's hard for people to get over. When somebody insults you, when somebody pushes you too far, it comes down to that decision-making process again and how you should defend yourself.
Yeah.
And that comes down to preparation, walking to your car or in the heat of the moment. I don't know how people get over that part. Do you think that just happens naturally with training?
Training, experience.
Yeah. Because it's hard, right?
Environmental context. Yeah.
That's what draws people in a lot of the time, you know?
Every time.
Someone calls you a cunt and someone insults you and other people are watching and you've got to, do you defend your honor? Do you not? How do you do it? Do you do it with words? Yeah. Do you do it physically? Are people going to think you're a pussy?
Yeah.
I feel like they're the thoughts that run through people's mind.
All the time. And the older you get, they talk about the older you get, the grumpier you get, the less you care about what anybody thinks or says about you. But that should be your attitude straight away, because there's an old saying, lions don't worry themselves with what sheep think. And that's, you've just got to be that. You've just got to consider everybody else's. It's inconsequential. It doesn't matter what you think of me. And it really doesn't. It doesn't matter. It's a little bit different if it's happening within a work environment where you're being undermined. Being undermined is certainly a different thing if you're trying to achieve something. But generally in a useless conflict, let's put it that way, where it just doesn't matter. There's no win to any of this. Then it doesn't matter. Just, don't worry about it. Be safe, but don't be fazed by, people swearing at you. If you do something wrong on the road and someone swears at you, they're upset. You don't have to swear back at them. You can just sort of go, fuck, I'm sorry, I'm an idiot. Gesture something that says, yes, I did something wrong. If you didn't do anything wrong and somebody's upset with you, you can go, sorry, have a good day. But it's easy to get in the trap. And generally when your ego jumps in, you feel safe enough or you feel competent enough for your ego to then be fired up by the scenario. But if something happens and you know very well that you're going to lose a fight, you generally don't decide to escalate it. Generally speaking.
I've definitely seen people do it.
I'm probably guilty of it. I don't know. At some point.
Just out of spite.
Right? I'll prove you wrong and I'll die trying to do that. It's a pretty pointless exercise.
Yeah. Can you speak to everyday carry, things that are legal? So,
yeah.
For the average person out there to make themselves a little bit safer out on the street when they're moving through their day, we're not in America. Can you equip yourself with something more than just your hands and feet to be able to look after yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. You can. I just got to work out how I present some of those things. Yeah. If you're a night owl, like if you do spend a lot of time in the dark, being out and about, I suggest like a minimum 1500 lumen torch. Like that's pretty damn bright. Like, you know, shine that in someone's eyes. Sometimes you can get them with sort of added extra bits on the bezel around the torch for impact, but generally not. That's a grey area that you kind of. I wouldn't recommend that's what you do, but if you get one, cool. So a really bright torch, like, man, we need an affiliate program if I'm going to continue with this.
We've got one.
Oh, okay.
I just set it up right now.
Right. Some loose coins, some throwaway cash, you know, some couple of fives and some gold coins.
Cash?
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah, you'd be surprised at.
What for?
Well, redirection, you know. Someone wants something from, if someone wants something from, you can throw it on the ground over there, and while they're distracted by the cash, you can get away. Or if you've got a decent handful of coins, throw it or keep it in your hand for a bit of weight for a punch if you like punching. Keys, metal water bottles, glass water bottles. But all of those, you know, once you begin using things for impact, you become blurring the lines of things.
Of what's legal for.
Of what
if you're preparing for purely impact.
Of what constitutes self-defense.
Yeah.
As
opposed to premeditation.
You're not meant to be prepared for self-defense.
Yeah.
Apparently. That's why we don't.
Because then you're setting yourself up to harm someone.
Yeah, well, because that's why we're not allowed pepper sprays or tasers. Or
do you think those things should be legal?
Yeah, 100%.
You do?
Yeah.
If pepper sprays or tasers could be legal, one or the other, which ones do you think would be more effective?
I had this conversation in New Zealand about this.
Is it legal there?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Damn. Pepper spray.
Why's that?
You got a bit more range. You know, you can generally pepper sprays have, 3 to 4 meter, sometimes 5 meter range on their squirt. A decent sized canister. Sometimes, tasers, the batteries might go flat, might not be charged. You have to be in close proximity.
Yeah, I guess I've seen a bear spray, but I've never seen a bear taser.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, pepper spray you can use in close proximity. You've just got to make sure upwind from the way you're spraying, because you don't want to spray it on yourself or sideways. Yeah, I think pepper spray. If there was out of those two things, I think I'd choose a pepper spray.
Yeah. Like if you were going to arm your wife or your daughter.
Pepper spray. 100%.
Yeah.
Distance. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And in a multiple scenario, like there's 3 people in front of you, you can only taser one person at one time, and you have to taser them for 5 seconds for it to be of any use. Whereas pepper sprays, and that's 3 people with, pretty hefty chemicals in their face, choking and stinging.
I've heard, the age-old tale of walking around with your keys in your hand, so someone jumps here, you can do some damage. Or any other everyday weapon that you might be able to have on you, which is like a phone. Phone and keys is usually what people have these days. Big set of headphones for me. Not much, right? Do you think that's helpful? Do you think keys are helpful?
Yeah, but you need training in them. You need to know what you're doing with them.
So if you've got a set of keys, you should be working out how you actually train how you're going to do it.
Yeah. Come on down to Southern Skies Aikido. I'll tell you all about it. Absolutely. But, just sticking your keys in your hand, I guess the most common way is to have them protruding through your fingers. If you don't know what you're doing, could probably hurt your hand more than you're going to hurt. But again, someone that's going to require or put keys in their hand may not necessarily know how to hit hard So having having some protruding metal when you can't really hit very hard isn't much use. Or if raking across the eyes with keys or across the face or something like that, I'm pretty sure you're going to lose the outcome. The outcome you'll lose for sure.
So what's the benefit of a torch exactly? Like, what does a torch do for someone when it comes to protection, self-defense?
Right. Well, if you're walking in a car park, you can light up the entire car park. You can search everywhere. All the shadows become daylight. So you're aware of your surroundings. A good torch is fairly instantaneously blinding. It's like looking at the sun and then trying to look at something. You really can't see things. So if your attacker or whoever can't really pinpoint where you are, you have a better chance of being elusive in that sense. And torch is just really handy.
Requires a fair bit of training, hey?
It does,
because
yeah.
we did a bit of training in that time, and we didn't do heaps. I don't know how many weeks we did this torch training for, which is awesome, by the way. It's very effective. For anyone who's wondering, does a torch work well? It fucking does.
With training.
But the precision thing, I didn't realize how precise you have to be.
Well, yeah.
I definitely walked into it with the assumption that I could just hit someone in the eyes perfectly. Not at all.
No. But, that would be the same assumption that you could hit someone perfectly.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So, again.
An assumption, yeah.
The preparation. You don't think you can hit someone properly, so you train to hit somebody properly.
Yeah.
And yet you think you can pick up a torch and shine it in someone's eyes perfectly to blind them without any preparation.
Doesn't work like that.
Nothing in the world works like that.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Must be prepared.
You have to be Boy Scouts, right? Be prepared.
Be prepared. Yeah.
You get home, you get out of your car, you put your torch on, you search around, you've lit up the front door, you've lit up the bushes around wherever you are. Your lights may not be on in the house. You may not want to turn the lights on in the house. You've still got a torch happening. Everyone that has a phone has a torch. It's not a very bright torch, but everybody's got a torch. So, the shadow thing, you can mitigate a lot. People should be able to be too sneaky around you if you've got your torch on. If if you look like you're prepared, then you become less vulnerable, and everyone chases the person that is vulnerable. If you're not a vulnerable target or an easy target, you'll be left alone, and the person or whatever that decides they want to do something will find a different target generally.
It's a really good point when you say that, because that gives me a lot of hope when it comes to preparation and training in general, that every small step along the way could potentially be the thing that puts you completely out of harm's way, which I think is pretty cool. Like, you might be training for the physical altercation at some point, but it may never arrive just because you're chucking out a different aura by the time you're a little bit more trained up, right? Like, you can feel it when someone knows what they're doing. You can definitely pick it up a little bit more.
Yeah.
So you're right. Every one of those little things puts you in a little bit of a better standing, which I think is fucking worth acknowledging. Worth acknowledging quite a lot, actually. It's pretty cool.
And this is all. I mean, most people that hear this, especially any instructor, could implement this stuff straight away, because it's a profound truth. Now, it's not anybody's idea, it's a profound truth. I put it into a codified system, structure, to teach it, to show it, to train it. Ivan and I were literally never had heard of high-powered torches and bouncing. He hadn't, and he had been in the game for 20 years. And I said, hey, man, look at these torches. Aren't they awesome? So we got some.
How did you come across it? Just life.
Yeah, just I was like, oh man, look how cool that is. You know, it was a good marketing ploy from America.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I think it was a Surefire torch which had a contract with the Rangers or something, whatever. So, and they were all on their like tactical guns. So, you know, they were on guns. People had torches on rifles and things when they'd do nighttime shoots and, you know, doing all their training. I thought, that's pretty awesome. How come we don't have torches? How come we don't have torches? And, you know, torches had been used, you know, the D-cell mag lights, the baton torch. Huh? Victoria.
They're illegal, right?
Banned.
Yeah.
Right? Because you don't need a baton torch. You need a torch. You know, why have you got a baton torch? To light up areas. Well, then you need a torch. You don't need something that's 45 centimeters long made of cast aluminium that weighs almost 2 kilo. That's a baton. So, you know, there's no reason for you to have that. Therefore, it's now outlawed in Victoria. Wonderful. Weird. So, you know, well, what can you use? Well, then you go high-powered. You go high-powered light. So we got some, and they were really expensive back then. Like they were, you know, I think they were a couple of $100 for a torch, for a fucking torch.
Yeah, right.
But we had them and we used them, and they were awesome. They were just phenomenal at, you know, just in nightclubs when you've got strobe lights on and it's like, you know, check out this guy, ba-boom. And, you know, they're lit up like they're in a spotlight in a nightclub, but it just looks like one of the lights have gone off. And yet you can clearly see, plain as day, that that's who you're meant to be looking at, and then using them as you know, eye deterrents, you know. And in a dark environment, when you have a bright light shone in your eyes, man, you're literally blinded for 30 seconds and you're pretty useless.
Well, yeah, it surprised me a lot because I remember when we were doing we turned all the lights off in the dojo, and I mean, everyone had to go, but I was legitimately, with a torch in somebody else's hand, I was legitimately trying to tackle him and catch him, just catch him, put hands on him, tag him somehow. And with like 5 minutes of training, I couldn't get hands on at all. I just completely blinded, couldn't see.
Yeah, 5 minutes of my Aikido training.
Yeah. Well, you still got to know how to move.
Yeah.
There's a lot of shit you got to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's for sure.
And then there were a whole bunch of other things that you use in subterfuge and motion and things like that. And
100%. Well, it's a tool, right? Like it's a piece of the process, but you still need to know how to do a lot of other things to be able to sort yourself out.
I mean, we were using torches for about 1.5 years, and then eventually someone had created a self-defense torch course that got released. And then all of a sudden, you know, private security for movie stars had torches, and you can get them with strobes now. I think there's some really good footage of, I think it's Natalie Portman's security, all the paparazzi there, and he's just gone and turned on the strobe. So now all the cameras can't take photos of anything because all the sensors are being picked up by this flashing light. So it's, you know, it's a really clever, super non-lethal way of just causing mayhem to your advantage. But yeah, I'm adamant Ivan and I were the first people bouncing using it, and once people saw it, then it was, you know, a pretty good idea. But it's a profound, when I say it's a profound truth, it just resonates. Like, you know, it could have been your idea, but it wasn't. But it's such a good idea that it can be your idea, and hence the value is now out there for everyone. You know, it's decentralized.
So when it comes to this whole, because I remember when you started talking to me about this stuff, like I mentioned earlier, I really hadn't thought about it. You know, I just thought about the specific altercation, what happens in the dojo, and do you think? I know we've spoken about it in the past, but I can't remember your opinion on this. Is this built this tactical sort of training, for lack of a better word, because I don't know what else to call it, tactical training, awareness, preparation training, is that built into martial arts anywhere?
Yeah. It's not as specific.
Yeah.
But as a general rule, yes.
Obviously, like there's a general, you're told, be aware.
Yeah. Yeah.
To a degree, but there's being aware and then there's being systematically prepared.
Oh, yeah.
The way that you systematically walk through the world so that you're just much safer, even if you can't fight at all, I feel like is like 99% of the process. When you started explaining it to me, I was like, fuck, that makes so much sense. Just like why you lock your car and lock your house and you get house insurance, and you've got all of these mechanisms in place in case something goes wrong, and just not having any of them in place for physical safety.
And it's a small vernacular, it's a small semantic. In case one of these things go wrong, you do these things so it doesn't go wrong.
That is an important point. Yeah.
You
do it so it doesn't go wrong.
Yeah, you have insurance in case. You don't lock your car in case someone goes to break into it. You lock it so they don't break into it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you would just leave it unlocked and save yourself a broken window.
Yeah.
If you feel like it's going to happen, leave it unlocked and keep insurance. No drama. You don't have to think about it. But you lock it specifically so someone doesn't open it and take it.
So should the same idea be put towards martial arts? Because a lot of people would do martial arts for when something happens, as opposed to do martial arts so something doesn't happen. Like you do martial arts so when something goes down, you can look after yourself.
Just in case something happens, right? Just in case I can look after myself. That's a common phrase. I do martial arts or self-defense just in case something happens to me. I can look after myself. Good luck.
You don't think that's a good justification?
Any justification to do martial arts is a justification. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad. But I believe it's the wrong attitude to look at it. I do martial arts, so I never, ever, ever am in that situation. I'm only in that situation because I put myself in that situation. And if I put myself in that situation, I need the training to help me in that situation.
So you're not accidentally finding yourself in that situation?
I've never accidentally found myself in any situation. It's always a deliberate choice, whether I am tired or those things that happen that make me into that scenario. I don't accidentally find myself in a situation ever.
That's a really good definition. I haven't fully thought about it like this before, because I've always just thought about it, and I think most people think about it, like you said, the for when something happens, but that's a whole different frame of thinking around it, doing martial arts so it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And then it's you choosing to be in those situations because you believe it's the right thing to do at that point in time.
Yeah. So if you're accidentally in a situation, all the precursors failed you. So the next thing you do is you go back into the dojo and you train the thing that got you in that thing in the first place. You don't go back and look at all the precursors and go, where did I stuff up to end up over here? Like I wasn't aware when I was walking down the street. I didn't see the mentally unstable person over there that was eyeing off my kid and grabbed them, Oh, okay. So that was my fault. Oh, that was my accident. That was my failing there. That wasn't the martial arts failing.
As opposed to just training for when someone grabs a kid.
Yeah.
And this whole concept I think is just so cool and so important, because it really expands on one side, which is the before thought but afterthought. What I mean by that is when you expanded my mind thinking about these things, on one side, the consequences of actions and inaction. So the consequences of everything, and then the preparation before consequences are even a possibility, like expanding out those two sides. And the further and further those considerations go out, it really does change the actions that you take in that point in time. Like if you're not thinking about the consequences at all, then you can just throw down however you want. It doesn't really matter, right? But then you think about jail time potentially, or you think about jail time and then having a family, and you start expanding that out of all the potential consequences, really does affect the way that you would act in the moment. And then the same with all of that preparation leading up to it, and all the training would affect the way you act in that moment. Like if you're not prepared and you weren't aware of the 20 things that happened up until that point in time, then obviously you're not going to be able to make the best educated decision, I guess. And I just haven't really heard people talk about it other than you. It's not like I'm out there listening to heaps of people, but in my scope of martial arts, I haven't heard people talk about this from people who do martial arts in a dojo.
It was never talked to me.
Yeah.
This is all my idea, and maybe it's a universal idea that I've put into words. Let's put it that way, right? That idea floats around in the universe, and it's taken me to say it.
Yeah.
And because I've said it, it rings true, and people would go, yeah, I've thought about that, but have you really thought about that? Like, maybe you have, maybe you haven't. Most people I've ever spoken to that have never used martial arts will always say, oh, when something happens, I'll turn it on. I'll turn it up.
I'm going to see red, man.
Yeah. I'll flick the switch, man.
Someone touches me or my family, I'm going to go fucking crazy, and that's it. You can't stop me.
Can't stop you, huh?
Yeah. Never done it before, but I guarantee you when I'm feeling it, it's going to happen. I'm going to get angry.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't believe in that phrase, that statement?
I believe there's people that are capable of doing that. I believe that every person that has ever said that to me is not capable of that.
Yeah. The people who are capable of it, it's pretty obvious. Or
like that's a person, man.
Just the kill switch.
Yeah. You know who they are.
Yeah. But for every other person who doesn't have that, you don't think that they have that capacity is real?
No. I think the want to have the capacity is very real.
Yeah.
But I think all the ramifications for doing that would override the reasoning you would do it.
Say that again. Okay. Expand that out for me.
Sure. So if you flick the switch and you do something, all the things that would happen to you in Victoria legally or socially, community-wise, that may affect you for doing such a thing would override you in that moment from flicking that switch. And the good example is, and it's not directed towards anyone because I've heard it from multiple people, just about everyone says it that has a family. You ever touch my family, I will fucking kill you.
It's one of the most common things.
It's the most common thing. Okay. To what extent? Because it's a broad statement. When do you flick the switch? So you've made up this scenario, you've made up a scenario, someone touches your family, you're going to flick the switch. In what scenario is your family
how is that actually going to happen?
What level of touching your family do you flick the switch?
Yeah, so is it if I'm walking down the street and someone kicks my kid in the face?
Right.
Is that where I kill them?
Right. Is that when you step in?
Do I step in and I murder them on the spot? Do I beat them up?
Sure.
Do I tell them to fuck off?
Yeah.
Like at what level?
Yep. So there's that. That wasn't what I was thinking.
Oh, sorry.
But yes, but that is the line. The other one is what has to happen to my family for me to then flick that switch.
Okay. Yep.
Kicking a kid in the face. Yeah, man, you deserve everything you get. Right. In my book, you do. Like if someone scrubs your kid's hair that you don't know them. So a stranger rubs your kid's head. Do you flick the switch? They stick their finger in your kid's mouth. Like, I'm just using kid as an example.
That's a good example.
They stick their finger in your kid's mouth. Is that when you flick the switch? Your kid's being bullied by other kids at school. Do you step in? All right. Like, where, what?
How bad does it have to be until you take action?
Yep. How hurt does your family have to get before you flick the switch?
I don't think many people would genuinely know that answer and know decisively. And this ties into the decision-making process that I was talking about.
And I think most people would believe their own bullshit and go, it wouldn't matter. Yet I have known parents that have stood back and let schools deal with their kid being bullied. And if you've ever observed that as a process, you'll understand that is pointless. Schools don't know what they're doing when it comes to bullies at all. So, okay, so we can scratch bullying off. You're not going to flick a switch. Case in point, some random stranger comes up and grabs your head. Nothing happened. Scratch that off from when you, right?
Yeah.
You get into a fight with someone your own age at your school and wasn't your fault for whatever reason. Someone picked on you and you got into a fight and you lost. Is that when I flick the switch and I go sort that out? Most people wouldn't. You go, well, shit happens in life. You got to toughen up or learn some martial arts or don't deal with it or get the school involved. Fuck the school.
Yeah.
Fuck every school, to be honest, when it comes to this stuff. There we go. I've got a kid, so that's probably going to come back and bite me in the ass. They just have no concept of how to deal with it. And most parents don't know when, like they haven't thought about it. It's about when they would step in or how they would step in until it happens. And then it's a reaction to what's happening. So there's no process, there's nothing you've done to get them out of any situation.
Yeah.
To do their best. Martial arts instructors that say that, mate, I've turned up the heat and pressure with so many people and their technique has fallen apart. So that's just as simple as attitude towards your training partner, and technique falls apart.
Which is
and that's like a safe environment.
I think a general idea for a lot of people is, I thought this as well until we actually started putting it to the test, is whatever you train, if you add anger and aggression and speed and power to those things, it's better.
Doing it.
Yeah, like my technique, except when I'm angry, is fucking 20% better. But then my technique when I'm angry and I use full force, it's like 30% better. And you start adding all of these things on top. There's this assumption that that's me turning it up. Mm-hmm. It's going to be what I do slowly and carefully, times like 10. Mm-hmm. It's going to be fucking vicious.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've seen it, we've tried it,
what a pipe dream that is, eh?
Yeah, and then you get your perfect technique, and then you try and do it 5 times quicker.
Yeah.
With all the force, and you can just completely fuck it up. You miss. You try and hit something as hard as you can, you miss it. So it's like without that preparation and that training and that honest look, you just don't know. And this is another thing I hadn't thought about, these type of questions that you pose. And I think thinking about your family and like what you would do in those situations is really important, because I can think of a lot of times where, and I guess this is what gives people a lot of regret in a lot of ways, depending on how they dealt with situations, looking back, oh, fuck, well, I wish I did that, or I wish I did this, I wish I said that, I wish I took this action, that would have been great, but I didn't. I just stood there like a fucking dick, and didn't do what I wanted, and it's purely just because you haven't thought about it. Would you advise people to think about these things? Maybe you don't have to go as extreme, but you think it's a helpful thing to do?
I think it's a helpful exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure people listening to this are going to be thinking about it right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it, you know, what would, okay, give, I'll put this on you. What would be a scenario that you would be mostly categorically sure you would flick a switch and do something? What would have to have happened for you to then get hands-on and physical in response to something happening? What would be that scenario?
If I was outnumbered and I couldn't get out of it, that would be one. Like I'm in a situation that I can't buy time and I can't talk my way out of it, and I suddenly realize that I'm fucked.
Yeah.
That would be a time for my personal safety. With Ellen,
Okay.
Once again, I think there's a lot of things that I'm pretty confident that I would spend time and effort trying to mitigate and de-escalate. You know, like if someone grabbed her or something, I think I wouldn't try and like murder them on the spot. I would try and neutralize the situation, I think. But anything more aggressive than that. So I guess, yeah, I think when it comes to physical touch, now I'm thinking about it, as soon as there is a grab or a hit or anything like that from somebody else, not towards me, but towards Ellen, that's where I would begin moving.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. Then the next exercise, if you're following along at home, is what would you do? Do you even know what you would do? And to what extent? So
there's limits to my thinking, I'll be honest about that. Like there's a line that I know I can go to, and then there's a line above that which I'm not 100% sure what happens. I haven't thought about it enough. You know?
What type of grab would have to happen? What would that look like in that scenario? You've got your loved one.
You're walking down the street.
Well, okay, cool. So we got
let's set it up. We'll get it as close as possible.
Yeah,
I'm walking down the street. Ellen's just getting dragged into this. Walking down the street, got Ellen there. Let's say the scenario, what is it? A crackhead comes up.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it's common in Melbourne. Comes up and
Dave Chappelle. Grab your mother.
Comes up and grabs her on the arm. What's the common thing? A grab on the back of the arm.
Okay.
That kind of thing.
Sure. And let's just assume for this scenario, Alan is surprised and freezes.
Surprised and freezes.
Yep. What the hell is happening? Because that's kind of, she's a powerful woman. I'm pretty sure she'd be like, get the...
Yeah. A side note, I do make a joke with her that anyone that wants to fight her, then I probably don't want to fight him anyway. I'd want him to be asleep.
Yeah. Okay.
That's cool. I'd want them to be asleep.
Is that an overreaction?
I just don't know if I'm feel confident enough them not being asleep. I don't know if I feel confident enough. I don't think it's I personally don't think it's an overreaction. I think if someone comes up out of nowhere and grabs you, they could have done anything. You know, they could. The possibilities are endless as soon as someone grabs you. So I think that the minimum is they be asleep. I think like jumping on their head after that point might be a bit much. I don't think that would necessarily be necessary, but I'd want them to be asleep and just not been able to move to give myself some time to fucking work out what to do next. That would be my...
Okay, cool. So we have we have the beginning.
Yeah.
We have the switch and we have the outcome.
Yeah.
The bit in between the switch and the outcome. How have you slept them?
Yeah. Exactly. Specifically.
What have you done? Because, you know.
There's a lot of ways to do it.
Well,
Yeah.
are there though? Because now you've got a body. You've got, you know, you've got the grabbed, the grabby, the grabber, and the environment. Let's assume it's a narrow footpath. That's kind of common, walking down the street.
Yeah.
Is the person in the way? Is Alan in the way? Like, you know, are the angles correct? What angles do you need to take? So knowing what you're going to do.
Let's assume I'm going to have to walk around.
Let's assume some form of movement has to happen to collect the correct angle. And then what are you doing to cause the effect of knocking them out? And all of this hasn't been thought about. But it's a scenario where you go, yeah, man, that's where I'd flick the switch, man. That's I'd do that.
But I agree with you. There are blanks. Yeah. There's dark spots.
Yep.
In that scenario.
Now let's consider
that are assumptions.
You've had perception training specifically about these types of things. And I'm not picking on you.
No, of course.
I'm just saying that even with someone that's had this exposed to them has gaps in what they would do.
Mm.
So if no one's ever thought about it, the whole thing is a void.
Yeah.
You don't know when you would flick. You don't know the scenario in which you would flick the switch. You don't know what the outcome of you flicking the switch would be, and you certainly don't know how you would do that, let alone all the other things that go along with that. And that's why when we find instructors in teaching martial arts and self-defense that don't have any practical experience of any form of conflict outside of the dojo, we have to make the assumption that what they are presenting as truth is the structure of the art. So you have to find that within. It's the most freeing, but it's also one of the most limiting ways in which you observe what is being taught to you, because there's no experience there. But when it is explained to you by an instructor that is at the front, it always feels like they are fully knowledgeable about this thing.
Yeah.
Like it's, you know, they know. They're teaching me. They know. They must know. They must have worked this out. They must know. Yet, there's less than a handful of instructors that I know personally that I have experience with that have had experiences to call from within Aikido, I should say.
Yeah.
Now, I know there are instructors out there that have been to war zones, have, you know, experienced that kind of conflict and that kind of combat, which again is different to just purely street or everyday life kind of conflict, or even just security bouncing, because it's a different type of thing that happens as well, and they have their experiences to draw upon as well, which might be radically different from me, and experience certain things that did work that I found didn't work for me, or vice versa, or we find a common ground in which things didn't work or did work. Yeah. I just haven't come into contact with them. Because generally, I think there's a lot of generalizations in this conversation, that most instructors that have experience or real life experiences about these types of things tend not to get together, which is really weird, and share that, so that there's no real bonding that happens between this Aikido instructor over here and me over here and that instructor over there, or this jiu-jitsu instructor over here. And, you know, we don't tend to come together and share these life experiences that we've had in that scenario.
I feel like the people who've actually been through real shit don't talk about it, you know. they're not even not boasting about it. They just don't talk about it, even in a place to be helpful. It's just like, it's just something, it doesn't come up much.
No. Well, because it's very hard to have a real conversation with someone about something like that has never experienced it.
How do, yeah.
You know, you know, old veterans could talk to me about war, but they wouldn't, because I don't know anything about war. I've never experienced it.
You can't connect to that.
Yeah. And I heard, you know, why people from World War II dealt with the horrific atrocities that happened in World War II was because they debriefed in the 3.5 months on the boat coming home with the people that had experienced it as well. So they found that.
So they got to get it all out.
They got it all, you know, they knew that you went through the same shit as I did, and we could talk about it, perhaps laugh about it and resolve some of the conflict within ourselves, then get home and don't talk about it. Because what the hell would your wife know about you being on the Dardanelles fronts in France, you know?
Yeah.
Like what? And why would you even want to expose?
Why would you want to put that on someone?
Exactly. So you live with that anguish, and then you have things in Melbourne like Anzac Day, which was a really important day. And we're making it less and less important because for some reason, these people that went to war had a chance to get back together with the people that experienced the same atrocities and horrificness. And had a moment to share and celebrate themselves for not dying during that period of time. But now Anzac Day is like, let's wipe it off the mat. Let's not have it. Let's call it something else. And how dare you, really? It's important, really important to people that lost a piece of their soul. And I think that's a bit like, you know, people that do have war stories from bouncing, or, you know, the fight stories that they don't generally share or boast about to people that haven't really had that experience. Or if they do, they generally sound like they're showing off a lot.
Yeah.
You know, so most people just kind of keep to themselves and have a select few people that they might explain things. But then you might have instructors like myself that go, hey man, these are the things that I do. And these are the things that I've experienced. And this is, if you implement these will help you, you know. And that's, but it's hard to get across because there's this thing sort of happening now about how can I talk about a woman's problem because I'm a man, but it's not necessarily a woman's problem. It's the same problem I incur. Violence is violence. I just experience violence in a slightly more violent way than other people, or less violent way than other people, but I still have experience of violence, and there's things that I do, even with my ability, my size, my strength, that I don't do, which most common people would do and put themselves in these really vulnerable positions, but I don't do them.
Yeah.
Now, if I don't do them, perhaps you should sort of stop and think and go, why doesn't someone that has, you know, 30 plus years of martial arts training, life experiences in bouncing, is the size of a goat, you know, and the strength of a horse. Like, if he's not doing that, but I feel like I can do this because I have some righteousness in the world that I should be able to do something like that, but I don't do it. Perhaps you should take that lesson from me and go, oh, perhaps I shouldn't do that either. You know, walking down dark alleyways. I don't do it. You shouldn't do it. Nobody should do it. Work out a different way.
It's a good point, man. You've given me a lot to think about, that just this whole concept of thinking things through, like actually thinking things through, and doesn't mean just in the situations we're talking about, but just life in general, you know, like thinking through the conversations that you want to have. Often if you don't think through them, you fuck it up. And that goes for kind of decisions across the board. Everything seems like it could be better if you've thought through how it is that you want to take action in life, basically. So worth thinking about. Man, we're coming up 3 hours.
To everyone that commented that they couldn't listen to the last one because it was 2.5 hours long, I apologize. Watch it in 3 parts.
Yeah, so I think, whether you listen to this one or you listen to the last one, I think they'll work interchangeably with one another, so it's all good. Got a bit more of your story, so thank you. I know it's boastful to share the war stories, but I'll dig them out of you at some point.
Yeah. Good luck.
Any lasting words, man?
Nope.
No.
Come and join us. Come and do some training.
Anyone
do some study.
Anyone who's listening to this who is thinking, hey, you know what, I'd like to go out and get some training of some form, definitely come down and give it a go. Maybe you want to do torch training. Maybe you want to have more conversations about how to actually prepare yourself and prepare your life to be a little bit more safe. It's not just about the physical realm. That is an element of it. So yeah, anyone who's interested in this stuff and wants to get down and get around it, once again, I'll chuck everything in the show notes, in the description on Spotify and YouTube. You can reach out to Scott on Instagram. We'll put all of that there as well. And so, yeah, if you've thought about it or you've done some other martial arts before, don't knock it until you've tried it. There's a lot of really good stuff to learn that's beyond just punching and kicking.
Yeah, and if you've done Aikido or you're still doing Aikido, hit us up, because I think you'll find that there's a whole nother world to be looking at through the set of eyes that we're looking at Aikido through. You might be surprised at how much you're missing.
There's a lot under the surface.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you'll be quicker at it if you've done Aikido before, I think. I'm pretty good like that.
Awesome. Well, once again,
thank you, Dylan Brown Podcast.
Thanks. Thanks, brother. You're a legend. Everyone else, thanks for listening. You're all legends, and peace out.